I'm getting very, very bored, and that is the entire inspiration for this video. Hopefully it's not terrible. Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella, and today we're going to be discussing all the books I purchased on my Kindle in the past 12 months. One of the things that I tend to love so much and watch when I am bored are book hauls. I just like the idea of positivity coming in. You don't have to talk about how a book has disappointed you because you haven't read it yet. I haven't actually purchased enough books to do a book haul this year. I have 8 books purchased in total, which is unreal to me if you know my history in book purchasing, and one of them's not even in yet, so it just doesn't seem worth it to do a haul, although I have been eyeballing Book Outlet's website and really wanting to order something from them, but I've been trying to resist. And then I remembered a year ago I did an ebook haul. I figured, why not update it? I've been noticing such a shift in my reading, and I don't know, I find it interesting. Hopefully you do as well. So we're going to talk about the 50 million ebooks I've purchased over the past year. Also, this is going to be in alphabetical order by author because that's just the easiest way to organize this. The first book I have on here is Queen of the Conquered by Kacen Callender. This is a book that came out late last year, if I'm not mistaken, and I've been wanting to read it ever since. It's an adult Caribbean-inspired fantasy story. It focuses on an island that has been conquered, colonized, and the native people, I believe, rise up and try and get revenge on these oppressors. I've wanted to read Kacen Callender for a while. They have a couple books that I've wanted to read across age range and genre, but this one seems like a really good place to start. The covers are gorgeous. They released the cover for the second one a few months ago, also lovely. Yeah, I can't wait to read this one. The next book I have on here is The Wolf by Leo Carew. I don't know how to say his last name. This is also an adult fantasy story that I purchased a long time ago, so I don't know what it's about. I then also looked up the synopsis and it wasn't particularly striking. I just remember purchasing it because someone talked highly of it, and then it was like the Kindle Daily Deal the next day, so it felt fortuitous. I think this is inspired by like England and their history, like 1200s Britain, I think, and there's like 2 warring kind of peoples. The synopsis was not clear, but yeah, this one, don't know when I'm gonna read, to be honest, but I have it. I also have The Tethered Mage by Melissa Caruso. This is also an adult fantasy story. It is the first book in a trilogy. I have just seen this one so often when I'm at the bookstore, and the covers have always been intriguing to me. I don't know what it's about, common theme, but the people I have seen read it do generally really seem to like it, and I'm always down for an adult high fantasy when it goes on sale. You better believe I purchase them so very quickly. Another adult high fantasy, although one I have read, and that's The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. This is one of my favorite series of all time. I love these books so very much. This is the second book in the Davabad trilogy, and it went on sale. I love the book, so I decided to purchase it. I also have on here The Black God's Drum by P. Dideli Clark. This is a Tor.com novella that I've seen so much good buzz for that when it went on sale, I had to grab it. Everyone has loved this novella. I've only ever seen 4 and 5 star ratings, and for a novella, I think that's pretty impressive. All I really know about this is that this is an Afro-futuristic inspired story. I really like Tor novellas from what I've read, so yeah, I had to grab that one too. The next book is a bit of a departure for me, and that's Next Year in Havana by Chanel Cleaton. This is an adult historical fiction book, and if you know anything about me, I kind of hate historical fiction. It just never is interesting to me. There are a few exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, I don't like historical fiction. The selling point for this was that it is a dual timeline between like present and like the past in the 60s in Cuba, if I'm not mistaken, or it follows a young girl traveling back to Cuba and like experiencing like her Cuba and like her grandmother's Cuba. I'm not sure. So now we're going to get into some of the books that you'll also see my taste shifting. I've mentioned it a few times, but I've really seen my taste shifting towards more adult in recent times. Adult fantasy being my absolute favorite. And I've also been getting into adult romance, which is quite a departure. I have A Princess in Theory and A Prince on Paper by Alyssa Cole. These are books 1 and 3 in her Reluctant Royal series. Whenever they go on sale, I buy them. That's why I don't have book 2. This one's kind of interesting because there are a little bit of speculative elements. There's like a fictional country that I believe all of the characters have heritage with. It is own voices for being Black. And I enjoyed the first one. I have actually read the first one. Didn't love it, but I'll read on. I also grabbed Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors by Sonali Dev. I love Pride and Prejudice, so I saw that this was a Kindle Daily deal and I purchased it. Oh, I don't think I've ever filmed in front of these shelves before. It's kind of fortuitous, but we should be able to tell that I love me some Pride and Prejudice. So if there's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, you're damn sure I'm gonna read it. I've actually read this one. It's Along for the Ride by Mimi Grace. This is an adult contemporary romance debut that I read in January. It is own voices for Black representation, and it was really fun. It's got a couple tropes that I think people really enjoy. There's sort of enemies to lovers, road trip book, only one bed, a horde of tropes that tend to be really enjoyed by Romancelandia. And this one I also enjoyed. No kidding with the romance things. It's funny that they're all in the same spot. I also have The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. I don't know anything about this one other than the fact that Jasmine Guillory, she's a bit of a controversial author, if I'm not mistaken. Some people really like her work, some people really hate her work, and I guess I saw it on sale and purchased it. I just realized that this video is going to be a bitch to edit. And I know I said I was bored, but am I bored enough to insert the covers of like 25 books? I may have bitten off more than I can chew. More romance. I also have Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This follows a fat, Black, chronically ill British woman who has sort of a kind of near-ish death experience where she realizes that she hasn't done much with her life, and she writes a list and is going to shake up her life. I loved this book. I read it in early April, and I think it's my favorite romance book of all time, which isn't saying like too much because I think I've read total maybe 8 romance books, but I loved it. I read it within the span of one night with a giant smile on my face, and when my April wrap-up is live, I will be sure to have it linked because I loved this book and I would love to gush about it. So I also grabbed the Inheritance trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This also proves that I don't pay attention to what I have on my Kindle most of the time because I've now purchased the book used, but this is a bind-up of N.K. Jemisin's trilogy, and I don't know what it's about. I just really like N.K. Jemisin, and I'm an idiot and I purchase everything. But again, I don't really care because this is like, I was gonna say fictional. I'm so used to saying fictional. This is digital, so it does not occupy space. Again, with the I don't pay attention to what I purchase, I have A Curse So Dark and Lonely on here by Bridget Kemmerer. I'm sorry, her last name is so difficult to say. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which initially does not sound good because Beauty and the Beast retellings are slightly tired, but it focuses on a girl with cerebral palsy, and I believe it's an urban fantasy, and people really love this book. I'm really on board with the idea of reading some representation with cerebral palsy. I've heard that the representation in there is pretty decent, so yeah, I'll give it a shot. I also own this book in print as well, so hopefully I read it soon. I'm not entirely sure how to say the title for this one, but I have This Guy by J. Kristoff. I am also not sure what this one is about. I did at some point in time, but everyone loves J. Kristoff, and I want to read his books, but he like also is kind of messy. Like he's real messy on Twitter, so like I go back and forth on wanting to read his stories and all this kind of stuff, and I don't remember purchasing it at all. Common theme with my reckless spending. It's not reckless. They're like $2-3. The next book I actually know what this is about because I love it, and that's The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. I love the Poppy War series, that is no secret. And it went on sale and I wanted to have it in ebook. It's the second book to the Poppy War series. I can't wait for the finale. It's a great series. I have reviews for both of these books if you're interested. The series is epic. What are you waiting for? Read them. I also have The Fever King by Victoria Lee. This, I did know what it was about for a while, but it has such a dedicated fan base. I believe this is a duology that has been completed, and I'm actually not even 100% sure if this is young adult or adult. I believe it's in that sort of crossover spot, and all I know is that this book is fantasy and it's also very queer, so I don't need really much else to know about a book. The next book I have, I'm not so sure if I'm actually going to read now, and that's The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. This is a young adult. This is an adult contemporary, if I'm not mistaken. I purchased it under the belief that it is a romance, and you might think like there's not really that big a difference between them, and you're correct, there's not really, other than the fact that I believe this book is more of a melodrama and there's a lot of personal turmoil going on with both of these characters individually, and I think this is like a 450 page contemporary story, and I don't think I'm on board for that. I usually read them because I want something quick and a bit mindless. This one has also definitely gotten very mixed reviews, but it focuses on these two people who live in the same apartment, the same flat, and they never really meet because they work different schedules and like they share the same bed. Don't ask me the logistics of that. We'll see if I get to this. The next book I have is a bit of a departure for me. It's a bit different, and that is Under the Udala Tree by Chinelo Okparanta. This, I only say is a departure for me because it's adult literary fiction, and I often get intimidated by literary fiction because I just don't feel, I guess, smart enough to read it most of the time. But I saw such a glowing review for this years ago by someone on BookTube who doesn't even make videos anymore, but the way he talked about it, how genius it was, I've always been attached to reading it. All I remember about this story is that it focuses on a girl growing up in Nigeria, and then she discovers, or she finds herself falling in love with a woman, and there are consequences for that, and she kind of realizes she's going to have to hide that part of herself, and then things occur. Talk about weird purchases. I don't remember purchasing this at all, and that's Geekerella by Ashley Poston. I don't think I want to read this anymore. This is a Cinderella young adult contemporary retelling, and it just doesn't really seem interesting to me anymore. I think I vaguely wanted to read it. I don't remember why I actually went and purchased it. Maybe I'll read it if it's a prompt for a readathon. That's really where I see myself reading it, but yeah, it focuses on this girl who's in love with a show that's really similar to Star Trek, and they're like adapting it again, and then the boy that is cast is a celebrity and she is not a fan of the fact that he is the one cast in it, and then they fall in love. That kind of sounded like a boring synopsis. I'm sorry, it's probably a lot more exciting, but that's all I remember. I also have The Right Swipe by Alicia Rye. This is an adult romance, and I believe it focuses on a web developer, app developer. She ends up creating an app that is really successful, aka like a Tinder sort of a thing, but she herself can't fall in love and I think is a bit of a cynic, which I can relate to, and then she falls in love. Another book that I know very little about is Sisters of the Winter Wood by Rena Rosner. This is an adult fantasy story, so I purchased it. The next book I have is Not Even Bones by Rebecca Schaefer. This, I think, is a young adult fantasy story that focuses on this girl who sells organs on the black market until she is betrayed. I believe this is a very revenge heavy story, which I'm always on board for, to be honest. The synopsis sounded pretty interesting. It said she does a good deed to save someone, and then she ends up getting her ass in jail, and so she's going to do a lot of bad deeds to make up for it and get hella revenge. So sounds pretty cool. Okay, we have a few more left on here, so let's get through it before some family member comes and interrupts me. Fun fact, I tried filming yesterday. I was ready, had makeup on, like literally ready to go, but then my brother, who I shared that wall with, refused to leave his room all day long. I was ready to commit bloody murder by the end of the day. I have Toil and Trouble. This is an anthology. Doesn't have really good reviews. A lot of the reviews say that most of the stories are pretty negative, but this is a young adult anthology that focuses on witchcraft, which like in theory sounds great. It really does. But yeah, again, I might read this if like a readathon prompt comes up, or like what if I want something witchy. But I did take this off my Goodreads want to read list a few months ago, and I forgot I had it on ebook. Like, it's just not something I'm desperately wanting to read anymore. One book that I'm very excited to read and will be picking up in the next few days actually is The Deep by Rivers Solomon and a couple other people whose names I never remember. This is also a novella, but it focuses on mermaids, and if I remember the pitch correctly, it focuses on African people who were, I think, being like shipped over to the States to be slaves, but instead of being slaves, they like hopped over the edge and like found a living underwater, which sounds really cool, and I'm hoping I'm not butchering that synopsis. A book I'm literally dying to read is The Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. I think I'm gonna love this book. I think I'm gonna give it 5 stars. It's an adult fantasy story that I think skews a little bit more romantic, but it just sounds so freaking cool. I believe there's an arranged marriage in here. I think it's an Indian inspired world, and I'm dying for it. I believe this is a companion series, so the next book doesn't focus on these characters. So I'm really on board for like a full packaged story in one book. The final book I have on here is The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is a classic adult fantasy story. It is the first book in Robin Hobb's many trilogies. She has quite a few trilogies, all following mostly this one main character. The character's name is Fitz, and he's, I think, the bastard son of a prince, so he's raised to be an assassin. And this is the first part of his very epic story. I've heard mixed things for the first trilogy, but everyone loves like Robin Hobb and like the overarching story, so I'm interested to give it a shot. I always want to read classic fantasy, and I love the fact that this is such an epic story, or so well respected, and it's written by a woman. I think it was written in the 90s, I think. I'm not 100% sure. A few years ago, if you asked me if I thought my taste would shift so much, especially like towards adult romance, I don't think I ever would have thought that. Definitely the adult fantasy, but not so much the romance. But I think it's interesting. If there are any books on here that you have read and recommend, please let me know down in the comments below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!